So, what do you do? You've heard that question before. Perhaps you were standing at a party, a work event, or on a first date. You smiled. You answered with something simple like, I work in sales, or I'm an engineer, or I study. And then, nothing. A polite nod. A, short, oh, nice. And the conversation quietly died right there, like a match that never reached the candle. You felt it, that small, sharp moment of awkward silence. You looked at your glass, the floor, the wall. You searched for another sentence, but your mind went blank. Later, walking home, a thought crept in. Maybe I'm just not very interesting. I have met many people who say this about themselves. They sit across from me and confess, Mr. Carnegie, I don't know how to talk to people. Conversations slip through my fingers. People don't remember me. They think, secretly, that there is something wrong with their personality, their job, or their past. But I discovered something very different. Most people are not boring. They are simply asking the wrong questions. Let me show you what I mean. Think of the last date you went on where everything stayed on the surface. You spoke about the weather, work, a little about movies or music, and then you both went home with a vague sense of having met no one in particular. No spark, no depth, just two polite strangers. Or recall a networking event. You shook hands, swapped names, asked, where do you work? And listened to short answers. By the end of the night, you had a pocket full of cards, and almost no one you truly wanted to see again. The faces blur together because every conversation followed the same dull pattern. Even in families, this happens. You sit at the table at holidays. You hear the same stories repeated, and you tell yourself, I already know these people. Yet you mostly ask, how's work? Or, how have you been? And receive fine and busy, and then the room drifts back to television or phones. Years pass, and the people closest to you remain half strangers. In all these situations, you may have blamed yourself. I don't know what to say. I guess I'm not very engaging. But the problem is rarely your entire personality. Very often, it is simply this. You have never learned to use questions that open people up. There is a quiet truth about human nature. Most people are waiting, sometimes desperately, for someone to take a real interest in them. They want to talk about what they care about, how they became who they are, what excites them, what changed them. But they will not offer those parts of themselves to just anyone. They need a signal. They need a key. In this talk, I want to give you that key. There is one question you can ask that will make you immediately more interesting to the people you meet, not because you are performing, but because you are unlocking something inside them. When you learn how to use it, dates feel different, networking becomes easier, and even family dinners become richer. In a world full of people waiting to be heard, the interesting person is simply the one who knows how to ask. There is a strange thing I have noticed about people who say, I wish I were more interesting. Almost all of them are thinking in the same direction. They ask themselves, what should I say so they like me? They search for clever stories, impressive achievements, or something dramatic to share. They imagine that being interesting means putting on a kind of show. But life has taught me a very different lesson. You become interesting the moment you become genuinely interested. This is what I call the law of human interest. People are drawn not to the person who talks the most about themselves, but to the person in whose presence they feel most alive, most heard, most seen. You do not have to shine like a star. You have to make others feel that for a few moments they are shining. Most of us, when we walk into a room, are busy with the same anxious question, what should I say so they will like me? It is a heavy burden to carry. It makes you self-conscious and stiff. You measure every word, you judge every sentence, and you feel you are failing if the conversation does not sparkle. Let me suggest a lighter, far more effective question. What can I ask so they will enjoy being with me? Do you see the difference? The first question puts a spotlight on you. The second gently turns that spotlight toward the other person. And here is the secret. People remember and value the person in whose light they themselves felt good. Think for a moment about someone you know who talks constantly about themselves. Perhaps they always manage to bring the conversation back to their successes, their opinions, their problems. At first, you may listen politely. But soon you find your attention wandering. You look for a way to excuse yourself. Later, if someone asks, "What do you think of him?" you might say, "He likes to talk," but you will rarely say, "He is fascinating." Why? Because there was no room for you in that conversation. Now think of someone quite different, someone who asks you questions, waits for your answer, and seems genuinely curious. You might leave the conversation thinking, "What a delightful person," even if they said very little about themselves. You may even tell others, "They're so interesting." But if you look closely, what you really mean is, "I felt interesting around them. I felt seen." This is the law of human interest in action. We find those most interesting who show the most interest in us. The question, then, is not, "How can I decorate myself so people will find me impressive?" It is, "How can I open a door in this person so that their best self steps out?" When you think this way, your attention shifts. You stop trying to perform. You start trying to discover. Now, what should you be discovering? Over the years, I noticed that people light up when you invite them to talk about three things: origins, how something began for them; stories, what happened along the way; passion and pride, what they care about deeply. When you touch one of these areas with a good question, you will see a change. The voice warms, the eyes brighten, the posture shifts. Instead of short answers, you hear stories. Instead of fine and busy, you hear moments that shape them. That is why, in a moment, I will give you one simple question that does exactly this. It takes an ordinary fact. I'm a teacher. I play piano. I run my own business, and turns it into a doorway to a story. Ask it sincerely, and you will notice something remarkable. People will begin to talk in a way they almost never do, and they will walk away thinking, "What an interesting person you are." So now we come to the doorway itself, the simple question that can change the way people experience you. When someone tells you something about their work, their hobby, or their life, most people stop at the surface. They say, "Oh, nice," or "That's cool," and then quickly turn the conversation back to themselves or let it die. You, from this day forward, will do something different. You will say, "That's interesting. How did you get into that?" Or, "It's twin. That's two." Interesting. What's the story behind that? These may look like ordinary sentences, but they are built on powerful principles of human nature. First, notice the beginning. That's interesting. Those two words do something very important. They validate the other person. You are not judging, correcting, or ignoring what they said. You are saying, "What you just told me has value in my eyes." In a world where so many feel overlooked, those words are like water in a dry land. Then comes the heart of the question, "How did you get into that?" With this, you invite a say, story. You are no longer asking for a label. You are asking for a journey. You are saying, "Take me back to the beginning. Show me how this became part of your life." People very rarely receive this kind of invitation, and when they do, something inside them opens. Why does this work so well? Because it moves the conversation from fact to story. When someone says, "I'm a nurse," that is a fact. It is short, flat, and easy to forget. But if you respond, "That's interesting. How did you get into nursing?" Now we are entering a story. Perhaps a sick relative they cared for, a teacher who inspired them, a moment when they realized they wanted to help. The eyes go from neutral to alive. The voice warms. You are no longer talking to a label. You are meeting a human being. The same thing happens with hobbies. Someone says, "I'm learning guitar." Most replies end. The topic, "Nice. I wish I could play." But if you say, "That's interesting. What got you into guitar?" you may hear about an old song they loved as a child, a friend who played at school, a difficult time in their life when music became a comfort. Now you are in the realm of feeling, memory, and meaning. Even with seemingly boring jobs, this question works. A person says, "I work in logistics." Many would change the subject instantly. You instead say, "That's interesting. How did you end up in that field?" They might tell you about a summer job at a warehouse, a fascination with systems, or a chance opportunity that turned into a career. Suddenly, what sounded dull becomes quite human. Psychologically, this question does three powerful things at once. It makes the other person relive positive or meaningful emotions. When they tell you how they got into something, they revisit moments of decision, excitement, courage, or even struggle. They feel again some of what they felt back then, and you are standing there as the witness to that story. It associates you with those emotions. Their brain quietly links the warm feeling of telling their story with your presence. Later, when they think of you, they may not remember every word you said, but they will remember how they felt talking with you, understood, valued, and yes, a little more alive. It shifts the focus from performance to connection. You no longer feel pressure to sound clever. Your task is simple. Ask, listen, and follow the thread. This takes the strain out of conversation. You become free to be curious instead of impressive. Try saying these out loud for a moment. I'm a nurse. That's interesting. How did you get into that? I'm learning guitar. That's interesting. What got you into guitar? I work in logistics. That's interesting. How did you end up in that field? Can you feel how each follow-up opens a door? Most conversations remain at the level of headlines. This one question moves you into the story behind the headline. And in that story, people reveal who they really are. When you are the person who invites and receives those stories, others will begin to see you, not as boring or forgettable, but as remarkably interesting, because around you, they become interesting. Let us now take this question and walk with it through 4 different worlds: the office, the social gathering, the family table, and the quiet heart of the shy or introverted person. You will see that the same simple phrase can transform each of them. Most professional conversations begin with the same dull exchange. What do you do? I work in marketing. Oh, nice. And there it ends. 2 human beings with entire lives behind them are reduced to job titles, and then the conversation dies of starvation. But imagine you answer differently, not with your own story, but with a better question. Someone says to you, I work in marketing. You smile, look them in the eye, and reply, marketing? That's interesting. How did you get into that? You have just changed everything. Instead of dropping a label and moving on, they now have a chance to tell you about their journey. They might say, well, I actually started in graphic design, or I used to think I'd be a journalist, but then suddenly you are hearing about their early decisions, the people who influenced them, the risks they took. You are no longer talking to a marketer. You are standing beside someone who once sat in a college dorm room worrying about their future, or who took a chance on a small company that grew. Their eyes will often brighten as they remember. You may even see a little smile as they say, funny you should ask that. What happens in their mind? They think, perhaps without words, most people never ask me that. They just nod and move on. But this person seems genuinely interested. And that is the person they will remember after the event ends. Networking is not about collecting cards. It is about collecting connections. And connections are made not at the surface of what do you do, but down in the story of how did you get into that. Now let us go to a party, a wedding, or a small gathering with friends of friends. Most conversations float on the surface like leaves on water. Do you like music? Yes. What kind? Oh, all sorts. No wonder people feel drained by social events. But you can change that with the same doorway question applied to the small details people share. Suppose someone says, I love hiking. You could answer, me too, and then change the subject. Or you could lean in slightly and say, you love hiking? That's interesting. What's the story behind that? Do you remember the first time you fell in love with the mountains? That question carries people back. They might tell you about a childhood trip with their family, or a difficult period in life when walking in nature helped them breathe again. They might laugh and say, actually, I hated it at first, and then describe the moment it changed. The same is true for travel. I love Italy, someone says. You can reply, Italy? That's interesting. How did you get into traveling there? If you listen carefully, you will soon hear about a first trip, a person they met, a decision they made to step out of their comfort zone. The conversation moves from postcard pictures to personal turning points. When you speak this way, you are no longer one more polite stranger. You become, in their mind, the person with whom they had a real conversation. They will say later, I met someone so interesting tonight. Though you may have spoken very little about yourself, it is not a trick. It is simply what happens when you give another person the rare gift of focused curiosity. Many people assume they already know their family completely. I've heard all my father's stories, they say. My grandmother always talks about the same things. And so they stop asking. They let the old tales loop on repeat and never realize there are entire chapters still unopened. I have found that this same question, used gently, can open those chapters. Sit with your father and ask, Dad, how did you get into that first job you always mention? Say it with genuine interest, and then listen. You may think you know the answer, but very often you will hear something new. A moment of fear, an unexpected rejection, a kind stranger, a chance opportunity. Ask your grandparents, how did you and Grandma meet? Really? Not just the short version they tell at parties, but the real story. Ask your mother, what got you into teaching? Or what made you choose that path instead of another? You will be surprised how much they have never said, simply because no one asked. When you do this, you become interesting to them in a very special way. Not because you perform, but because you become the one who makes them feel alive again in their own memories. You become the son, daughter, or relative with whom they are willing to share a little more of their heart. And this does something important for you as well. Your own sense of identity deepens. You see the struggles and choices that shape the people who shaped you. You realize that the ordinary lives around you are filled with extraordinary stories. Finally, let us speak to the quiet ones, those who say, I never know what to say. I'm not good at conversation. I have met many such people in my classes, and I always tell them, you are not handicapped. You are holding untapped strength. You may not enjoy talking about yourself for long. You may dislike competing for attention in loud groups. That is all right. You do not have to, with one good question. You can sustain a meaningful conversation and be remembered as a delightful companion. The next time you stand beside someone at a gathering and feel your mind go blank, remember this. Your job is not to entertain them. Your job is to discover them. Listen for any small clue, a job, a hobby, a place they have lived, and then say, that's interesting. How did you get into that? Or, what's the story behind that? After that, let them talk. Nod. Ask one or two gentle follow-up questions. What happened then? How did that feel? You will find that many people are eager to tell you more. They have simply never been asked. By doing this, you carry very little pressure on your own shoulders. You do not need to be witty. You do not need to be loud. You only need to be sincerely curious. That is a role perfectly suited to a quiet, thoughtful person. And here is the beautiful twist. People will walk away thinking, what an interesting person you are. Not because you dazzled them, but because they felt unusually comfortable, heard, and valued in your presence. In every one of these worlds, work, social life, family, and the inner life of the shy, this one question acts as a key. Turn it gently, and you will see doors open that you never knew were there. Now let us turn this from a pleasant idea into a living habit. A question only changes your life when it leaves your mind and enters your daily conversations. Before you speak with someone at work, in a shop, at a family dinner, I invite you to carry one simple thought into that moment. My job is not to impress. My job is to discover their story. Most of our social anxiety comes from trying to impress. We worry. Will they like me? Will I say something clever enough? That turns every interaction into a little performance, and performances are tiring. Discovery is different. When you see yourself as a discoverer, the pressure falls away. You are not the show, you are the audience, and you are privileged to be there. Here's a little inner script you can use, the way I taught my students years ago. First, observe one detail. It might be something they say, I've had a long day at work. It might be something you see, a musical instrument case, a sports logo on their hat, a book in their hand. Your only task is to notice. Second, reflect a bit of interest. A simple, oh, you had a long day, or you play guitar, or you're into hiking. This shows that you are paying attention. It is the small tap on the door before you open it. Third, ask the doorway question. He mentioned he's tired from cold. Work, you ask? What do you do? He answers, I'm a nurse. You reply, that's interesting. How did you get into nursing? Or you see a guitar case. You play guitar? Yes, I've been learning for a while. That's interesting what got you into. Guitar. Observe, reflect, ask, then let the story come. You will make mistakes at first. That is all right. Let me warn you about a few common ones so you can avoid them. One error is to ask the question and then quickly grab the conversation back for yourself. Someone begins to tell you how they got into teaching, and you interrupt. Oh, I had a teacher like that too, let me tell you. Soon, they are listening to your story instead of finishing theirs. If you do this often, people feel cut off, and the magic of the question is lost. When you ask, how did you get into that? Give them the gift of space. Let them finish. You will have time to share your experiences later. Another mistake is to fire questions one after another so quickly that the other person feels examined instead of appreciated. This can happen when you are nervous. You think, I must keep the conversation going. And so you machine gun them with why, when, how, who, and they grow uncomfortable. Remember, you are not an investigator, you are a guest. Ask one good question, listen, and then add a gentle follow-up only if it feels natural. A third error is to use the question without genuine interest. People are remarkably good at sensing the difference between curiosity and technique. If your mind is elsewhere, if your eyes are scanning the room for someone more important while you ask, what's the story behind that? The words will fall flat. The question works not because of its syllables, but because of the heart behind it. Slow down. Be with the person in front of you. For a few minutes, treat them as if they are the only person in the room. Now, let us turn this into a small, concrete exercise. Today, not tomorrow, not. Someday choose two people you will speak to. They do not have to be strangers. They could be a coworker you see every day, a family member, or someone at a cafe. With each of them, you will do one simple thing. Listen for a small detail about their work, their interests, or their life. And then ask the doorway question once. That's interesting. How did you get into that? Or, that's interesting. What's the story behind that? Then, you will let them talk. You will not rush to add your opinion. You will not change the subject unless they seem uncomfortable. You will simply stay with them in their story. At the end of the day, sit down for a moment with a piece of paper and write 2 short notes. What did I discover? Perhaps you learned that your colleague became a nurse after caring for a sick parent, or that your quiet neighbor started painting during a difficult time in his life. These are treasures you would have missed without that question. How did their energy change? Did their eyes brighten? Did their voice grow more animated? Did they lean in, smile, or seem more relaxed? Notice these signs. They are proof of how powerful a single, sincere question can be. If you repeat this little exercise day after day, you will build a new habit not only of conversation, but of seeing people. And as you see them more deeply, something almost inevitable will happen. They will begin to see you differently, too. Before we finish, I want to leave you with a different way of seeing yourself. You are not just a person trying to be interesting. You are a collector of stories. Every person you meet is like an open book that has never been fully read. Some covers look plain, some are bright and bold, but all of them contain chapters no one has heard in quite the way you will hear them. Your question, that's interesting, how did you get into that? Or, what's the story behind that? Is the small key that opens that book. When you walk into a room with this identity, everything changes. You are no longer asking, how can I make them impressed with me? Instead, you are quietly saying to yourself, whose story will I discover today? The pressure falls away, the competition disappears. Conversations stop being tests and become treasures. You do not need to become louder, funnier, or more dramatic to be interesting. You simply need to be more curious. People feel drawn to the one who draws them out. They remember the person in whose presence they felt like their own life mattered. If you wish, you can anchor this new identity with a few short affirmations. Say them to yourself before a social event, a meeting, or even a family dinner. I am curious about people's stories. I become more interesting by discovering others. One good question is worth more than 10 speeches. These are more than pleasant phrases. They are a compass. They point you away from self-consciousness and toward genuine connection. Each time you ask the doorway question and truly listen, you prove them true. Now, I would like to hear a little of your story. In the comments, tell me, what country are you watching from? How old are you? And who is one person in your life whose story you would like to know better? A parent, a grandparent, a colleague, a friend, someone whose book you have only skimmed so far. Write their name, and let this be a small promise to yourself that you will ask them one day soon, that's interesting. What's the story behind that? And if you want more questions like this, more Carnegie tools to help you speak, connect, and relate to people in a way that makes you naturally more magnetic and deeply human, then I invite you to subscribe. There are many more stories waiting for you out there. All you need is one good question and the courage to ask it.